What do you think is the number one conversation mistake that people make?
Whenever they get into the conversation, particularly when they're having to push a particular point or view or issue, is that what they say has to be accepted. Whenever I say something, well, we just kind of expect the other person to take it. And when it comes to ideas, maybe in the boardroom, maybe late at night with your spouse in the living room, we just naturally assume that our idea is the best idea and our thought is the best thought. And we are just naturally built to defend against anything else that anybody says ever. So let's say we're in a boardroom, somebody throws out an idea. If it doesn't have every hole plugged and it's not tied with a bow, we have a very natural default to go, oh, that's a dumb idea. That's a terrible idea. That's stupid. Or why would you even say that? When we think that what we say is just a gift from the heavens and they should naturally say yes to it. So it's this idea of trying to win the argument, win the conversation, have what you say be the only thing that could ever be heard in the conversation.
Right. And so instead of like somebody going into an argument to win, like what do you think the goal should actually be?
Yeah, what I'd like to say is you need to see arguments as not something to win, but something to unravel. When you see arguments as knots in the conversation, it turns it visual almost. So I like to kind of see it. You fish at all. I like to fish down here in Texas. If you have an open face reel, which means the spool is right up at the front, and you have a backlash and it's just a bird's nest of a thing and you're having to like undo it all. It's kind of like that. When you just continue to pull your way and I'm pulling my way and you're going, no, you need to go with my point of view. And I'm saying, no, you need to go with my point of view. It tightens it. It doesn't unravel it. It doesn't loosen it. So when you start to begin at the loose ends, and sometimes I might even say in the conversation, okay, help me unravel this knot. So one, I'm saying, help me, which people like to be helpful. Two, I'm saying this knot, meaning the thing that we're having to struggle with right now. Let's talk about that. What do you see from your side? What do I see from my side? Rather than continuing to try to push my point, just make it worse.
At the end of the day, people can get incredibly defensive in an argument. This is like something you talk a lot about, talk about it in your book. How can people avoid like getting defensive in an argument with somebody when things are super emotional?
Well, whenever things are emotional, that's the first problem right there is when you are letting your emotions take the steering wheel, it's really hard to engage your analytical side, that logical side. The side says, let me be curious about this. Who's the person behind the words? What's really happening right here? Because every time you're in an argument, somebody's having a conversation in their head that you weren't invited to. Like they know things that they have in their life, their own triggers, their own experience, their own trauma that you may only be seeing the tip of the iceberg on. And so when you say that one comment that they think is so incredibly hurtful and you're going, what are you talking about? All I said was X. A lot of that speaks to things that you can't see. So when you want to make sure that let's start with you not trying to be defensive. It's this mindset that you need to just drop it. We like to get defensive because we take things personally. We find ways to take what they said as a personal affront, or maybe it's they are saying something in a way that says you are undermining my authority, my autonomy, my control. And when you can just tell yourself to just drop it and try and get curious of what's happening on the other side, it's going to make things a whole lot easier. Now, where you also win is, I like how I said win, where you also find success is by keeping the other person from getting defensive. So that's one of the biggest strengths that you can do is keep the other person from getting defensive. And what I teach is that when you use phrases that make them feel acknowledged at the same time without being directly confrontational, it's going to go a whole lot better for you. So if you and I are in a conversation, Doug, and you're starting to push your point, and if I just said, no, that's dumb. I don't agree with that. That's stupid. Point aside, you're going to take that personally and go, are you calling me an idiot? Like, what do you know what I know? Who are you to tell me what I should believe? It makes things worse. But if you could just say, I agree. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with what they're talking about. But if you were to say, I agree that's worth talking about. I agree somebody needs to look into that. I agree that's important. All they hear is I agree. And they withdraw, getting defensive. Or you could say something like, well, that's helpful to know. That's helpful. That's helpful to know. People love to be helpful. Or you tell them what you've learned. After listening, Doug, what I've learned is this is really important to you. And so I want to make sure we keep talking about it. So all of a sudden you're just going to go, oh, okay, thank you. You made me feel acknowledged. You made me feel like what I said was not dumb. It was not something to throw pie back in my face. So those are just little ways you can try and de-escalate the defensiveness that is so natural to every one of us.
And I think what also can happen is the other person might naturally just get defensive, not, I don't want to say on accident, but you could do all the right things and they still will get defensive because they feel like you're hurting them, or they feel attacked by you bringing something up that maybe bothers you about the situation. How can you maintain control of yourself in the conversation when the other person begins to act a little irrational?
The number one thing you can do to make sure that you say things with control, which is step one of what I teach in my book, The Next Conversation, is you say it with control. And that means you have to put your breath as the first word that you say. So when you put breath, before you even say anything else, you think of it as an actual word that you're putting in first. So you're starting with your breath. It keeps the emotions from getting flooded, no matter how unreasonable this other person is being, how emotional and responsive they are being. Reactionary is the better word. Using your breath keeps you more in control. Now, if you and I are in an argument and all of a sudden I start raising my voice and I start yelling at you, and are you kidding me? Versus taking a breath and saying, okay, keep talking. Tell me more. Well, which one sounds more in control? Which one says I'm grasping for control? The other one says I am in control. Whenever you can put breath as the first word that you say, you naturally are in control, because you have that moment before the argument really even begins, before you go into your ignition mode in this and start getting into the hard fight or flight. You are making sure that you are keeping your analytical side engaged. So really the tip that anybody can do is making breath be the first word that you say. It's going to make it a whole lot better. Like if you were to ask me, hey, Jefferson, how was your day? And immediately I said, it was good. It was good. It was fine. It was a good day. Versus you just ask me, hey, how was your day? And I took a breath and it was good. It was a good day. Like, which one sounds like you actually thought about the question? Which one makes you feel like you acknowledged what you said and you found it valuable? Anytime you can use your breath and slow down your words, slow down the response, you always look more in control.
Part of being in control of the conversation also stems from having a level of confidence in yourself to be able to talk about what it is that you're talking about. How can people get better at appearing and becoming confident during conversations?
So rule 2 of my book is say it with confidence. And the way that I like to implement this into my clients and to people that follow my content is you have to find an assertive voice. People feel like confidence is something they need to have before they have the conversation. Like, I'm working up the confidence to say this. That's wrong. It's the opposite. Confidence is the outcome. Confidence is what you get after you do the assertive thing. So I teach confidence is as assertive does. So when you can use your assertive voice, that is what is going to give you the pieces of confidence that will continue to just be in a loop. The more assertive things you say, the more confident you feel. The more confident you feel, the easier it is to be assertive. And it is a sense that is within you of, I know where I am. So once you feel more in control, you automatically sound and feel more confident. A quick little trick that I use, aside from one of the ways we could talk about assertive voice, is just using the word confident. Just using the word confident naturally makes you appear and sound and feel more confident. Like if I'm interviewing for you and you ask me a question, I could say, if I said, I believe I could really bring some value to this team, versus I'm confident I can bring some value to this team. All of a sudden, the other person, you're going to get your notepad and go, man, this person sounds confident. And just using that word attributes that quality to you, not only to the other person, but also to yourself, which is incredibly important.
I want to talk about how to get better at speaking in an assertive way. You and I touched on this and covered this in our first conversation, and I catch myself sometimes like fluffing up like an email, like, hey, hope all is well. Just instead of just getting to the point. I think you and I talked about this because I think sometimes I guess my conscious is like, oh, are they going to think that I'm not caring or empathetic? And then many people do this. So talk a bit about like why that doesn't matter as much and how to become more assertive.
It does matter. It's not about using more words. It's about using the right words. Where people get bogged down is they feel like if they say more things, they will be more believable, be more liked. It will reap additional, even more benefits, but it's actually just the opposite. If you were to say to me, invite me somewhere, and all of a sudden I start a very long text, like, hey, Doug, thank you so much for inviting me. Like, I've just been so busy lately, and, I need to go water my cat and feed my house and do all these things. And I need to, and I've just been so overwhelmed. The more you say, the less believable you sound, the more fluff that you add into it. It's this concept of the more words it takes to tell the truth, the more it sounds like a lie. So when you are responding in emails, let's just put it in written correspondence. You're typing, you're texting, whatever. There's the tendency to give more, but nobody wants to read a long paragraph. As soon as you get that paragraph text, you go, oh gosh, and you miss a lot of the key points. Same thing with a long email. There's nothing worse than a long email. All you do is you gave me a chore. That's what you gave me. You didn't give me an email. You gave me a chore for me to dissect exactly what you're trying to say. The problem we run into is we just use a lot of fluff, use a lot of adverbs. I have a friend who he almost always starts a sentence with, so basically, or so essentially. That's just fluff. That doesn't mean anything. Using words like just, so, essentially, literally, basically, obviously, clearly, all these things that mean nothing. Like you don't need them. You just remove them from your sentences. There's a difference in how it sounds. If I were to email you, hey, just want to check in, versus I wanted to check in. Like just removing that word just makes it less hesitant, less like you're not sure of yourself and you don't want to intrude. It's leaning into your conversation, leading into your words. So the best rule is to always say less. If people have questions, they will ask you. You want to make sure that you are being a well of information, not a waterfall of it.
And when it comes to maybe texting with your significant other or somebody that you're dating, I would imagine you have to be careful with how direct you are, because if somebody's like, how's your day? And you're like, it's great, and you don't say anything else, your perception might be like, yeah, I'm just being honest and that's what it is. How does it differ when you're communicating with somebody that you love?
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be not just people you love, but really anyone. I'm not saying be short. There's a difference between being short and saying less. Being short is it's great, good, okay, cool. Like typical dad texts. This is how my dad texts. Like I could text him some cool things that are happening and I'll just get back cool. You know what I mean? Like there are ways that if I were to respond to my wife and just go K, like I might as well have just signed a death warrant. Like it's not going to do any good. So there is a difference when I say being short versus being concise. And if you want to say it's been an awesome day, thank you, versus it's a little bit different because in personal relationships, we want to know more. I'd say there's a difference most of the time between men and women of who want to know all the things and how you're feeling about all the things versus as us guys, bros, if you're going to text me, our text thread's going to be pretty short and pretty boring, but that doesn't mean that we're not tight and we're not friends and we're not still great on the same page. It's very different. I find most of our defaults. But when it comes to personal communication, it is best policy to be direct and be open and be honest rather than beginning with all of the fluff. I don't mean don't tell them how you're feeling. You don't need to, that's wonderful. That's necessary. My biggest things, particularly in the workplace, is you want to be very careful of over explaining and oversharing, that's when you can get into trouble.
And so when it comes to remaining assertive and having respect for yourself and gaining respect from other people, I think what can happen is you send that assertive email or text to a boss, colleague, etc., and their response isn't what you thought it would be. And sometimes people end up maybe wanting to give a little bit more so they can, appease that person.